Rain pounded the asphalt of Chicago's South Side, washing away the remnants of a shattered empire. Gabriel Navarro slumped against the brick wall of a dead-end alley, clutching a fatal gunshot wound to his abdomen. The cold reality of death was settling in. He closed his eyes, accepting the dark, until a small, warm hand tugged at his ruined tailored jacket. Gabriel forced his heavy eyelids open to find a 5-year-old boy in a yellow raincoat staring down at him. "Don't cry, sir," the child whispered, wiping a mix of rain and sweat from Gabriel's cheek. "My mom is going to save you." Pain was a familiar companion to Gabriel Navarro, but this was different. This was the cold, creeping numbness of an ending. Minutes earlier, a routine sit-down at a supposedly neutral warehouse had violently unraveled. His own lieutenant, a man he had trusted like a brother, had sold him out to the Cavalli syndicate. Gabriel had managed to shoot his way out, leaving 3 of Roman Cavalli's top enforcers dead on the concrete, but he hadn't escaped untouched. A low-caliber bullet had torn through his side, and the heavy bleeding was something he couldn't stop with just pressure and willpower. He dragged himself into the narrow, trash-strewn alley behind a row of dilapidated apartment buildings. The storm above raged, the freezing downpour soaking through his dark suit, chilling him to the bone. Gabriel collapsed behind a rusted dumpster, his chest heaving. He was 34 years old, the undisputed head of the Navarro family, a man who controlled politicians and shipping ports alike. Yet, here he was, bleeding out in the gutter, like a stray dog. A single tear of frustration, born of physical agony and the bitter sting of betrayal, leaked from the corner of his eye, mingling with the rain. He prepared himself for the end. Then came the tug on his sleeve. Gabriel's hand instinctively twitched toward the holster at his shoulder, but he didn't have the strength to draw the weapon. He forced his eyes open, expecting to see one of Cavalli's hitmen standing over him to finish the job. Instead, a pair of wide, innocent green eyes peered at him from beneath the hood of a bright yellow raincoat. "Don't cry, sir," the little boy murmured, his voice a soft, melodic contrast to the roaring storm. The child reached out, his tiny fingers surprisingly warm against Gabriel's freezing, clammy skin. "My mom is going to save you." Gabriel blinked, his vision swimming. He thought he was hallucinating, experiencing some dying fever dream. But the boy was real. He was clutching a small, wet teddy bear in one hand. "Leo, get away from there." The panicked female voice cut through the rain like a siren. A woman appeared at the mouth of the alley. She was drenched, her blonde hair plastered to her skull, wearing worn scrubs under a cheap, thin trench coat. She rushed forward, grabbing the boy by the shoulder to pull him back. "Leo, what have I told you about wandering off?" she scolded, her voice trembling. Then, her eyes fell upon Gabriel. She froze. Evelyn Foster knew the look of a dying man. As an emergency room trauma nurse at St. Jude's, she saw it 3 times a week. But she also recognized the danger radiating from the man slumped against the brickwork. The expensive Italian wool of his suit, the gold watch peeking from his cuff, and the heavy, menacing shape of the firearm, holstered at his chest, painted a clear picture. This was not a victim of a random mugging. This was organized crime. "Mommy, he's hurt," Leo said, tugging at her scrub pants. "You fix people. Fix him." "Leo, we have to go," Evelyn whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every survival instinct screamed at her to grab her son, run to their ground-floor apartment just 10 feet away, lock the door, and dial 911 anonymously. Gabriel's head rolled to the side. His dark, piercing eyes locked onto hers. He didn't plead. He didn't ask for help. He just looked at her with a chilling, quiet acceptance that somehow terrified her more than a threat would have. "Please, Mommy," Leo begged, tears welling in his own eyes. "He's crying." Evelyn looked at the blood pooling around the man's expensive leather shoes, washing down the alley drain. She looked at her son, whose pure, untainted heart couldn't fathom leaving a hurt person behind. And then she looked back at the man. If she called an ambulance, the police would come. If the police came, whoever shot this man might come back to finish the job, catching her and Leo in the crossfire. "Damn it," Evelyn hissed under her breath. She dropped to her knees in the filthy puddles. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, keeping her voice authoritative to mask her terror. Gabriel managed a microscopic nod. "I'm going to help you up," Evelyn said, wrapping one of his heavy, muscular arms over her slender shoulders. "My apartment is right there. The back door. You have to use your legs. I can't carry you." With a grunt that tore from the depths of his chest, Gabriel forced himself upward. The pain was blinding. A white-hot iron spike driven through his side. He leaned heavily on the fragile woman, his vision blacking out at the edges. "Leo, open the door," Evelyn instructed sharply. The boy ran ahead, pushing open the heavy metal service door that led directly into Evelyn's small kitchen. Evelyn dragged Gabriel inside, the warmth of the modest apartment hitting them like a physical wall. She practically threw him onto the linoleum floor, lacking the strength to get him to the sofa. "Lock it, Leo." "Both deadbolts," Evelyn ordered. She stripped off her wet coat and dropped to her knees beside Gabriel, her nurse's training completely taking over. She ripped his ruined shirt open, exposing a chest covered in old, faded scars, and the fresh, bubbling entry wound just above his right hip. "No exit wound," she muttered to herself, her hands flying over his torso. "The bullet is still in there. It missed the liver, but you're losing too much blood." Gabriel watched her through half-closed eyes. She was moving with frantic precision. She ran to the bathroom, returning with a heavily stocked first aid kit, clean towels, and a bottle of rubbing alcohol. "This is going to hurt," Evelyn warned, her green eyes locking with his dark ones. "I don't have anesthetics. I have to pack the wound to stop the hemorrhaging until I can figure out how to get the bullet out, or until you let me call a doctor." "No, doctors," Gabriel rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper. "No cops." "I figured," Evelyn said dryly. She poured the alcohol directly into the wound. Gabriel didn't scream. His jaw locked so tight, Evelyn thought his teeth might shatter, and a low, guttural groan vibrated in his throat. He passed out entirely as she aggressively packed the wound with sterile gauze, her hands covered in the blood of one of the most dangerous men in the city. From the corner of the kitchen, little Leo watched silently, clutching his wet teddy bear, satisfied that his mother was, as always, fixing the broken things. Consciousness returned to Gabriel slowly, accompanied by the smell of cheap drip coffee and burning toast. He kept his eyes closed, running a rapid physiological assessment. The agonizing, sharp pain in his side had receded into a dull, heavy throb. He was lying on something soft, a bed that smelled faintly of lavender and worn cotton. He wasn't dead. He wasn't in police custody. He cracked his eyes open. The room was small, lit only by the gray morning light filtering through cheap horizontal blinds. A faded floral comforter covered him. His gun holster, he noted with a surge of adrenaline, was missing. "It's on the dresser," a quiet voice said. Gabriel snapped his head toward the sound, wincing as his side pulled. Evelyn was sitting in a worn armchair in the corner of the room. She was wearing a different set of clothes, jeans, and a thick, oversized gray sweater. She looked exhausted, dark circles bruised beneath her striking green eyes. Gabriel looked toward the cheap wooden dresser. His Sig Sauer lay there, fully loaded, exactly where she said it was. "You didn't empty the magazine," Gabriel noted, his voice raspy. "If the people who did that to you come bursting through my front door, I'd rather you be able to shoot back," Evelyn replied, taking a sip from a chipped ceramic mug. "I managed to extract the bullet. It was shallow, lodged against the iliac crest. You lost a lot of blood, but your vitals are stable. You need antibiotics, though, real ones." Gabriel pushed himself up against the headboard, gritting his teeth. He studied her. Women usually looked at him with either overt desire or naked fear. Evelyn Foster looked at him like he was a particularly difficult math problem she was too tired to solve. "Who are you?" Gabriel asked. "I'm the idiot who let a bleeding mobster into her house because her 5-year-old asked nicely," Evelyn said flatly. "My name is Evelyn. That's all you need to know." "Evelyn," Gabriel tested the name on his tongue. I know who you are," she interrupted, her voice tight. "Gabriel Navarro. I've seen your face on the local news. You own half the politicians in this city and are currently in a turf war with the Cavalli family, which is why I spent the last 6 hours scrubbing your blood off my kitchen floor with bleach so my son doesn't have to see it when he wakes up." Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly. He admired her grit. "If you know who I am, you know the risk you took bringing me here. Why do it? I told you. My son. He saw you crying." Evelyn looked away, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. He's too pure for this neighborhood. He thinks everyone can be saved. I didn't want to be the one to teach him that some monsters just die in the street." Gabriel went silent. Monsters. The word stung, surprisingly. He was a ruthless man, a killer by necessity, but he lived by a strict code. He never touched civilians, He never dealt in human trafficking. He was a businessman in a violent trade, but to this exhausted mother, he was merely the monster in the alley. "Where is the boy?" Gabriel asked. "Sleeping in his room," Evelyn said defensively, her grip tightening on her mug. "And you are leaving before he wakes up." "I saved your life, Mr. Navarro. Now I want you out of mine." Gabriel swung his legs over the side of the bed. He was wearing only his slacks. His ruined shirt and jacket were gone. He noted the heavy bandaging around his waist. It was professional, flawless work. He stood up, a wave of dizziness washing over him, but he locked his knees, refusing to show weakness. He walked over to the dresser, picking up his gun and sliding it into the waistband of his trousers. Beside the gun was his money clip, entirely untouched. He picked it up and pulled out a stack of $100 bills, easily $10,000. He tossed it onto the bed. "For the medical supplies. And the ruined sheets," Gabriel said. "I don't want your blood money," Evelyn snapped, standing up. "Take it," Gabriel said softly, but the tone brooked no argument. It was the voice of a man accustomed to absolute obedience. He walked toward the bedroom door, pausing as his eyes caught a stack of mail on a small hallway table. His trained eyes instantly picked up a final notice from a collection agency. The name on the envelope wasn't Evelyn's. It read, "Thomas Sterling." Gabriel froze. The dizziness vanished, replaced by a sudden, chilling clarity. "Who is Thomas Sterling?" Gabriel asked, his voice dropping an octave. Evelyn swallowed hard, clearly unnerved by his sudden shift in demeanor. "He's my ex-husband. He doesn't live here anymore. Not for 3 years." Gabriel turned slowly to face her. The puzzle pieces clicked together with horrifying precision. Thomas Sterling was a mid-level degenerate gambler. 2 years ago, he had borrowed $250,000 from a loan shark operating under the Navarro family umbrella. Sterling had vanished, defaulting on the debt. When the Navarro family recently lost a territory dispute to the Cavalli family, the Cavallis inherited several outstanding street debts. Roman Cavalli didn't just break legs, he took collateral. If Roman found out Thomas Sterling had a wife and a child, "Does Cavalli's crew know where you live?" Gabriel demanded, taking a step toward her. "What? I don't know what you're talking about," Evelyn stammered, backing away. "Thomas is gone. He left us with nothing. I don't know any Cavalli." Gabriel stared at her, then looked toward the closed door of the child's bedroom. The boy who had wiped his tear. The boy who was currently in the crosshairs of the most sadistic cartel in Chicago because of a deadbeat father. Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, matte black burner phone. He walked over and pressed it into Evelyn's trembling hand, wrapping her cold fingers around the device. "Keep this charged. Keep it on you at all times," Gabriel commanded, his dark eyes burning into hers. "There is only one number programmed into it, mine. If anyone comes looking for Thomas, if anyone so much as looks at you or your son the wrong way, you press send." "I don't want your protection," Evelyn whispered, terrified of the invisible web she felt wrapping around her. "You don't have a choice," Gabriel said gently. He reached out, his thumb lightly brushing a stray blonde curl away from her face. The brief contact sent an electric shock through both of them. "You saved my life, Evelyn. In my world, a debt of blood is absolute. I belong to you and the boy now, until the debt is paid." Before she could respond, Gabriel turned and walked out the back door, disappearing into the cold, gray morning, leaving Evelyn holding the phone like it was a live grenade. 3 weeks had passed since the night the storm washed the devil onto Evelyn's doorstep. For the first few days, every shadow made her jump. Every knock at the door sent her heart into her throat. But as the days bled into weeks, the oppressive fear began to lift, replaced by a strange, quiet mystery. Things began to change. First, the eviction notices stopped coming. When Evelyn called her sleazy landlord to beg for an extension, the man had stammered, addressed her as "ma'am" with terrifying politeness, and informed her that her rent was paid in full for the next 5 years. Second, the creepy loiterers who usually hung around the corner store near her apartment vanished overnight. The streets of her immediate neighborhood suddenly felt impossibly, eerily safe. She knew it was him, Gabriel Navarro. She kept the black burner phone buried at the bottom of her purse, a heavy, silent reminder of the dark guardian watching over them. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Evelyn was working a grueling double shift at the St. Jude's Free Clinic downtown. The clinic was a chaotic sanctuary for the uninsured, the homeless, and those who couldn't afford a real hospital. Evelyn loved the work, but it was exhausting. Evie, bed 3 needs a new IV line, and we have a laceration waiting in the lobby. Sarah, her fellow nurse and closest friend, called out as they crossed paths in the narrow hallway. On it, Evelyn sighed, pushing a stray hair from her forehead. She walked into the lobby, carrying a clipboard. The waiting room was half empty, but the air felt suddenly thick, suffocating. Evelyn stopped dead in her tracks. Sitting in the plastic waiting chairs were 3 men. They didn't belong here. They wore cheap leather jackets, heavy boots, and carried an aura of casual violence. The man in the center, a towering brute with a scarred jaw and a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, was flipping through a worn medical magazine. Evelyn recognized the type instantly. Enforcers. The man with the tattoo looked up, locking eyes with her. A sinister smile stretched across his face. He tossed the magazine aside and stood up, his 2 companions following suit. They moved toward the reception desk, deliberately blocking the exit. "You Evelyn Sterling?" the tattooed man asked. His voice was like gravel grinding in a concrete mixer. "It's Foster now. My maiden name," Evelyn said, forcing her voice to remain steady. She subtly backed up toward the swinging doors that led to the secure treatment area. "If you aren't here for medical assistance, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Oh, we need assistance, all right," the man chuckled, leaning against the counter. "My name is Vincent. I work for Mr. Roman Cavalli. Seems your ex-husband, Tommy Boy, left town with $250,000 of Mr. Cavalli's money. We can't find him, but we found you." "I haven't seen Thomas in 3 years. I have no idea where he is, and I don't care," Evelyn said firmly. "I divorced him because of his gambling. I don't have your money." "That's a real shame, sweetheart," Vincent said, his smile dropping, replaced by cold malice. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. He opened it and flattened it on the counter. It was a photograph of Leo. He was wearing his yellow raincoat, walking out of his elementary school. Evelyn's blood ran completely cold. The world tilted on its axis. "Cute kid," Vincent purred. "Looks just like his daddy. Now, Mr. Cavalli is a reasonable man. He figures, if Tommy Boy won't pay up, maybe we take collateral until he comes out of hiding. Little Leo would fetch a pretty penny on the dark web. Or maybe we just send Tommy a piece of him every week." Evelyn didn't think. The maternal fury eclipsed her fear. She grabbed the heavy metal stapler from the reception desk and swung it with all her might, smashing it directly into Vincent's face. Vincent roared in pain, stumbling back and clutching his bleeding nose. "You crazy bitch," he yelled. "Grab her." The other 2 men lunged forward, vaulting the low counter. Evelyn screamed, turning to run, but a heavy hand clamped down on her hair, yanking her backward with enough force to snap her neck. She crashed into the metal filing cabinets, the breath knocked out of her lungs. "You're gonna regret that," the man holding her sneered, raising a massive fist. The fist never landed. The sound of the clinic's front glass doors shattering echoed like a bomb blast. Evelyn watched through blurred vision as the chaos paused. Standing in the ruined doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun, was Gabriel Navarro. He was flanked by 4 men in tailored suits, but Evelyn's eyes were locked solely on him. He was no longer the bleeding, vulnerable man in her bed. He was wearing a flawless, charcoal gray 3-piece suit, an overcoat draped over his shoulders. His dark hair was slicked back perfectly. He looked like an apex predator stepping into a cage of frantic mice. Gabriel's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. When his gaze landed on Evelyn, pinned against the cabinets with a bruised cheek, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet by 20 degrees. A terrifying, murderous rage contorted his usually handsome features. "Let her go," Gabriel commanded softly. His voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a thunderclap. Vincent, bleeding down his chin, recognized the new arrival. His eyes widened in absolute terror. "Navarro? What are you doing here? This is Cavalli business. You are breathing my air. You are standing in a clinic that my family just purchased this morning," Gabriel said, stepping slowly into the room. His men fanned out silently, pulling suppressed weapons from their coats. "And you have your hands on a woman who belongs to me." The man holding Evelyn released her instantly, stepping back and raising his hands. Evelyn slumped against the counter, gasping for air, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "We didn't know," Boss Navarro, Vincent stammered, the arrogance completely gone. We swear. We were just collecting a debt from Thomas Sterling. His wife. She is not his wife, Gabriel interrupted, his voice dripping with venom. And the debt is void. You go back and tell Roman Cavalli that if he ever looks in the direction of Evelyn Foster or her son again, I won't just kill his men. I will burn his entire operation to ashes and make him watch before I cut his throat. Vincent nodded frantically. Yes, sir. Message understood. Good, Gabriel said. He casually adjusted his cufflinks. But you still touched her. Gabriel gave a microscopic nod to his men. 2 muffled shots rang out. The 2 men who had grabbed Evelyn dropped to the linoleum floor, instantly dead. Bullets lodged perfectly in their foreheads. Evelyn screamed, clapping her hands over her ears. Sarah, hiding behind a medical cart down the hall, sobbed in terror. Vincent dropped to his knees, shaking violently, waiting for the 3rd bullet. You live, so you can deliver the message, Gabriel said coldly to Vincent. Drag your trash out of my clinic, now. Vincent scrambled to his feet, pulling his dead comrades by their collars toward the back exit, desperate to escape the Reaper in the gray suit. Once the room was clear of the threat, Gabriel's terrifying demeanor melted away instantly. He practically sprinted across the room, shedding his overcoat. He knelt in front of Evelyn, who was trembling uncontrollably, her eyes wide with shock from the sudden, brutal execution she had just witnessed. Evelyn, Gabriel said softly, reaching out to gently cup her face. His thumb traced the redness on her cheek where she had hit the cabinet. Look at me. Look at me. Tesoro. Evelyn forced her eyes to meet his. He wasn't looking at her like a mob boss. He was looking at her with frantic, desperate concern. You're safe, he whispered, his forehead resting gently against hers. I'm sorry. I was tracking them, but I was seconds too late. I will never let anyone hurt you or Leo. I swear it on my life. Evelyn wanted to push him away, to scream at him for bringing death into her workplace, for being the monster he truly was. But as she looked into his dark eyes, all she felt was the undeniable, terrifying safety of his arms. She was trapped in his world now, and heaven help her, she didn't want him to let go. Why didn't you use the phone? Gabriel murmured, pulling her gently into his chest, burying his face in her blonde hair. It all happened so fast. Evelyn sobbed into his expensive suit, her fingers gripping his lapels. It's over now, Gabriel promised, lifting her effortlessly into his arms as if she weighed nothing. He carried her out of the blood-stained clinic and into the waiting armored SUV. You and Leo are coming with me. Thomas Sterling is a dead man, and Roman Cavalli has just started a war he cannot win. As the SUV sped away, flanked by a heavily armed escort, Evelyn realized her quiet, desperate life was gone forever. She had saved a king, and now he was taking her to his castle, whether she was ready for the rain or not. Massive wrought iron gates parted like the jaws of a mythical beast, granting the armored SUV entry into a world Evelyn could barely comprehend. The Navarro estate, nestled deep within the heavily forested enclave of Highland Park, was less a home and more a fortress disguised as a breathtaking limestone manor. Heavily armed men in dark suits patrolled the perimeter with imposing tactical dogs, their presence a stark reminder of the violence that funded such luxury. Inside the cavernous, marble-floored foyer, Evelyn stood frozen, still clutching her ruined coat around her scrubs. The adrenaline from the clinic was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and a terrifying realization of her new reality. Mommy, is this a castle? Leo's wide, awestruck voice echoed in the grand hall. He had slept through the chaotic extraction from his elementary school, scooped up by Gabriel's men before the Cavalli Syndicate could even formulate a plan. Now, he was clutching his teddy bear, staring up at a crystal chandelier that looked like suspended ice. Gabriel, having shed his blood-spattered suit jacket, crouched down to meet the boy at eye level. The dangerous, lethal aura that had suffocated the clinic lobby vanished, replaced by a quiet, steady warmth. It is a castle, Leo, Gabriel said softly, his deep voice rumbling. And you and your mother are my honored guests. No one will ever bother you here. Do you like video games? Leo nodded enthusiastically, his green eyes sparkling. I like racing cars. I have an entire room dedicated to racing cars, Gabriel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his rugged, scarred face into something startlingly handsome. He looked up, signaling to an older, maternal woman in a pristine housekeeper's uniform. Maria will show you. You can pick any room you want. Evelyn watched her son happily trot off with the housekeeper, the terrifying events of the day seemingly washing right off his resilient young shoulders. As soon as Leo was out of earshot, the air between Evelyn and Gabriel thickened, practically vibrating with unspoken tension. You can't just absorb us into your life, Gabriel, Evelyn whispered, wrapping her arms around her torso. I have a job. Leo has school. I am not a mob wife. I am a nurse. You were a nurse at a clinic that was just targeted by cartel hitmen, Gabriel corrected gently, stepping closer. The scent of his expensive bergamot cologne mixed with the faint, metallic tang of gunpowder. Cavalli knows you exist. He knows what you look like. If I let you walk out those doors, you will be dead before sunset, and Leo will be sold to the highest bidder. Is that what you want? Of course not, Evelyn snapped, tears of pure frustration welling in her eyes. But how is this any better? Trading one monster for another? Gabriel flinched slightly. The word monster still cut him when she used it, a reminder of the vast, bloody chasm between his world and hers. I am a monster to my enemies, Evelyn, Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre. But I will only ever be a shield to you. Before she could formulate a response, the heavy oak doors of Gabriel's private study opened. An austere man with silver hair and a sharp, calculating gaze stepped out. This was Silas, Gabriel's consigliere and chief strategist. In his hand, he held a thick manila folder bearing the unmistakable embossed logo of Kroll, the premier corporate intelligence and private security firm in the world. Gabriel used them discreetly to track financial ghosts. We have a problem, Gabriel, Silas said, glancing warily at Evelyn. The Kroll operatives finished their deep dive into the offshore routing. Thomas Sterling isn't just hiding, he made a deal. Gabriel's jaw locked. Explain. Silas opened the folder, pulling out a series of intercepted wire transfers from a Cayman Islands account routed through Northern Trust. Sterling didn't just default on the $250,000 he owed. 3 days ago, he actively contacted Roman Cavalli's lieutenants. He offered them a trade, a clean slate on his debt in exchange for a high-value bargaining chip. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Her stomach violently churned. He sold them my address, Evelyn choked out, her voice trembling. He gave them Leo, his own son. Gabriel took the Kroll dossier from Silas, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the paper. The cold, calculated rage that had dismantled his enemies for a decade flared in his dark eyes. Thomas Sterling hadn't just been a degenerate gambler. He was a coward who had served up his own flesh and blood to save his pathetic skin. Silas, Gabriel growled, his voice vibrating with lethal intent. I want every street soldier, every port worker, every corrupt cop on our payroll looking for Thomas Sterling. I want him found alive. Do not kill him. Bring him to the warehouse on 5th. Understood, Silas nodded, turning on his heel to execute the order. Gabriel turned back to Evelyn. She was trembling, staring blankly at the marble floor, as the ultimate betrayal of her past life crashed down upon her. The man she had once loved, the father of her child, had put a price tag on their heads. Gabriel closed the distance between them, abandoning all hesitation. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his strong, heavily tattooed arms around her fragile frame. This time, Evelyn didn't fight him. She collapsed against his tailored vest, burying her face in his neck, releasing a shattered, broken sob. I've got you, Gabriel murmured fiercely against her blonde hair. He pressed a firm, lingering kiss to the crown of her head. He will never touch you again. I am going to erase every nightmare from your life, Evelyn. I promise you. In the safety of the monster's embrace, Evelyn closed her eyes, realizing with terrifying clarity that she was falling in love with the devil himself. 72 hours dissolved into a surreal, gilded blur. Life inside the Navarro estate was an exercise in extreme contrasts. By day, Evelyn watched Gabriel interact with Leo with astonishing tenderness, teaching the boy how to play chess in the sunlit conservatory, patiently answering endless questions about the armored cars, and ensuring Leo's every anxiety was smoothed away. By night, Evelyn caught glimpses of the warlord. She would wake in the early hours to see Gabriel standing on the master balcony, a glass of scotch in his hand, quietly issuing orders over encrypted phones, orders that resulted in the systematic, brutal dismantling of Roman Cavalli's illicit empire. Warehouses burned. Cavalli lieutenants vanished. The Chicago underworld was bleeding out, and Gabriel Navarro was holding the knife. Evelyn felt torn between the horrific reality of his profession and the intoxicating, consuming passion bubbling between them. Every accidental touch, every lingering glance they shared across the dining table, was charged with an electric, undeniable heat. On the fourth afternoon, the fragile illusion of their isolated sanctuary shattered. Evelyn was sitting in the estate's sprawling library, trying to focus on a medical journal, when her old, cracked personal cell phone, which Gabriel had allowed her to keep solely to access her personal photos, buzzed in her pocket. She frowned. She had removed the SIM card. It should only work on the estate's secure Wi-Fi. She opened an encrypted email application she rarely used. There, sitting in her inbox, was a message from an unknown sender. Evie, please. It's Thomas. I know you're with Navarro. He's a psychopath, Evie. He's going to kill you and Leo when he's bored of you. I have a way out. I secured passports and tickets to London. I'm so sorry for everything. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the back entrance of the Palmer House Hilton downtown. There's a blind spot in the alley cameras. Bring Leo. Please, let me save my family. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. Let me save my family. The audacity of the message made her physically nauseous. 3 days ago, she might have felt a flicker of conflict, a ghost of the loyalty she once held for her husband. But after reading the Kroll intelligence report, after knowing he had traded Leo to clear a gambling debt, the email read like a venomous trap. She didn't delete it. She didn't reply. Instead, Evelyn stood up, marched out of the library, and walked directly down the grand hallway to Gabriel's private office. She pushed the heavy oak doors open without knocking. Gabriel was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, reviewing shipping manifests. He looked up, his sharp gaze instantly softening as it landed on her, but his eyes quickly narrowed as he registered the furious, pale expression on her face. "What's wrong?" Gabriel asked, standing up instantly. Evelyn walked over to his desk and slammed the phone down, pushing it across the polished wood toward him. "The snake is trying to lure me out of the grass." Gabriel picked up the phone, his eyes scanning the brief email. The temperature in the room plummeted. The muscles in his jaw ticked furiously as a dark, terrifying shadow crossed his features. "He thinks you are stupid," Gabriel stated, his voice a lethal, icy calm. "He thinks he can use you as bait to draw me out, or worse, hand you directly to Cavalli's men waiting at the Palmer House." "I want him stopped, Gabriel," Evelyn said. There was no hesitation in her voice, no moral conflict. The maternal instinct to protect her son had overridden her civilian sensibilities. She looked at the Mafia boss, her green eyes burning with a cold fire that matched his own. "He tried to sell my son. He is a threat to Leo. Do what you do." Gabriel looked at her, a profound mixture of awe, possessiveness, and dark pride swelling in his chest. She wasn't just accepting his world, she was surviving it. "Silas," Gabriel barked, not taking his eyes off Evelyn. The silver-haired consigliere materialized in the doorway seconds later. "Boss? Change of plans," Gabriel ordered, rounding the desk and stepping into Evelyn's personal space. "Sterling just gave us his location. The Palmer House Hilton, back alley service entrance, tomorrow night. It's a setup coordinated with Cavalli. Assemble the strike team. We aren't just going to capture Sterling. We are going to bury the men Cavalli sends with him. Consider it done." Silas nodded, a grim smile touching his lips before he disappeared. Gabriel reached out, his large, scarred hands gently cupping Evelyn's face. He traced the high curve of her cheekbone with his thumb. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known, Tesoro. You brought me the message. You didn't run." "I have nowhere else to run, Gabriel," Evelyn whispered, leaning into his touch, her heart hammering against her ribs. "And even if I did, I don't think I'd want to." Gabriel's control, ironclad and disciplined, finally snapped. He leaned down and captured her lips in a bruising, desperate kiss. It was a collision of fire and oxygen, a release of the agonizing tension that had been building since she first dragged his bleeding body out of the rain. Evelyn kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to the most dangerous man in the city. The following night, the suffocating humidity of a Chicago summer hung over the narrow service alley behind the Palmer House Hilton. The historic hotel buzzed with oblivious socialites out front, while the back alley remained a dark, forgotten concrete canyon. Thomas Sterling paced nervously beside a rusted commercial dumpster. He was a haggard, desperate-looking man, jumping at every shadow. Clutched in his sweaty hand was a burner phone. Hidden in the shadows of the fire escapes above him were four of Roman Cavalli's heavily armed enforcers, waiting for Evelyn to arrive so they could secure their collateral. At exactly 8 p.m., a sleek, unmarked black town car pulled to the mouth of the alley. The headlights cut through the gloom, blinding. "Evie?" Thomas called out, his voice cracking with feigned relief. "Evie, is that you? Hurry, bring the boy." The rear door of the town car opened slowly, but it wasn't Evelyn who stepped out. Gabriel Navarro emerged into the alley, illuminated by the halogen glow of the headlights. He was wearing a stark black suit, devoid of a tie, a suppressed tactical pistol resting casually against his thigh. The aura of absolute, unstoppable violence radiating from him caused Thomas to stumble backward in sheer terror. "Hello, Thomas," Gabriel said, his voice echoing off the brick walls like a death knell. "Evelyn couldn't make it. She sends her regards." "Navarro!" Thomas shrieked, instantly looking up toward the fire escapes. "Shoot him! Do it now!" Nothing happened. The alley remained deathly silent. Gabriel let out a low, dark chuckle that chilled the blood in Thomas's veins. "If you're waiting for Cavalli's shooters, they are currently bleeding out on the roof. My men secured the perimeter 20 minutes ago. You are entirely alone, Thomas." Thomas dropped to his knees, his hands clasped together in pathetic supplication. "Please, Navarro, please. I'll do anything. I'll leave the country. I'll never contact them again. Just let me walk away." Gabriel walked slowly down the alley, the rhythmic click of his expensive shoes sounding like a countdown. He stopped 2 feet in front of the groveling man. "You wagered money you didn't have. That is a sin of stupidity," Gabriel stated coldly, raising the pistol and aiming it directly at Thomas's forehead. "But you tried to sell an innocent child to a cartel. You tried to trade the woman who holds my heart to save your own miserable life. That is a sin I do not forgive." Thomas squeezed his eyes shut, sobbing openly, a puddle forming beneath his knees. "Look at me," Gabriel commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. Thomas forced his tear-streaked face upward, staring into the abyss of Gabriel's black eyes. "If you ever believed in a god, Thomas," Gabriel whispered, his finger tightening on the trigger, "pray that he is more merciful than I am." The suppressed weapon coughed once in the darkness. Gabriel didn't wait to watch the body fall. He turned on his heel, his face an impassive mask of stone, and walked back toward the waiting town car. The snake was dead, the grass was clear, and Gabriel had a promise to keep to the woman waiting for him in the castle. Silence descended upon the Chicago underworld in the immediate aftermath of Thomas Sterling's execution. It was not the silence of peace, but the heavy, suffocating quiet that precedes a catastrophic hurricane. Roman Cavalli had lost 4 men at the Palmer House, a humiliating blow that demanded a response of apocalyptic proportions. Gabriel knew the retaliation was coming, and he locked down his operations, pulling his most loyal captains into the fortified walls of the Highland Park estate. Among them was Dominic Vitti, a seasoned capo who had run the Navarro family's lucrative Southside distribution network for nearly a decade. Dominic was a charismatic, sharply dressed man who had always treated Gabriel with deferential respect. He sat at the massive oak dining table alongside Silas and 3 other lieutenants, reviewing the defensive strategies. Evelyn watched them from the threshold of the kitchen, a mug of tea warming her hands. She had traded her worn scrubs for a soft cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, looking every bit the queen of the fortress, even if she still felt like an imposter. Leo was upstairs in the West Wing, safely engrossed in a massive Lego set under the watchful eye of Maria, the housekeeper. "Cavalli is bleeding cash," Dominic stated, leaning over a sprawling map of the city. "He can't sustain a protracted war. We hit his illicit gambling fronts on the west side tonight, cripple his revenue, and force him to the negotiating table." Gabriel stared at the map, his dark eyes unreadable. "Roman Cavalli doesn't negotiate, Dominic. He retaliates. We don't strike his gambling fronts. We wait. We let him make a mistake out of anger." Dominic nodded, though a microscopic tightening of his jaw betrayed his frustration. "Understood, boss." Later that evening, the skies over Chicago opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour that mirrored the night Gabriel and Evelyn first met. Thunder rattled the reinforced glass of the estate's windows. Gabriel was summoned to an urgent, encrypted video conference with Alderman James Rossi, a corrupt city official on the Navarro payroll who claimed to have intercepted police chatter regarding Cavalli's next move. Evelyn retreated to the library, trying to find solace in a book. The heavy mahogany clock in the corner ticked toward midnight. Suddenly, the ambient hum of the central HVAC system died. The antique lamps flickered, then extinguished, plunging the sprawling manor into pitch blackness. A chilling, metallic click echoed through the silent halls. It was the sound of the estate's heavy magnetic security doors disengaging. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She dropped her book, her bare feet making no sound on the Persian rug as she sprinted toward the west wing. "Leo," she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She navigated the dark corridors by memory, and the sporadic flashes of lightning. As she reached the landing of the grand staircase, she heard a heavy thud, followed by a muffled groan from the foyer below. Peering over the marble balustrade, she saw the silhouettes of 3 men stepping over the unconscious body of one of Gabriel's perimeter guards. They weren't wearing the tactical gear of the Navarro security detail. They were dressed in dark street clothes, carrying suppressed automatic weapons. Cavalli's men had breached the unbreachable fortress. Panic threatened to paralyze her, but the image of her son's innocent face shattered the fear. Evelyn bolted down the West Wing hallway, bursting into Leo's playroom. Maria was already there, clutching a heavy brass lamp, her eyes wide with terror. "They cut the power, Miss Evelyn," Maria whispered frantically. "The backup generators have been sabotaged. Someone let them in," Evelyn realized, the horrific truth dawning on her. The security grid could only be overridden from the inside. "Mommy?" Leo rubbed his sleepy eyes, clutching his teddy bear tightly. "Why is it so dark?" "It's just a game of hide and seek, baby," Evelyn said, keeping her voice incredibly steady despite the bile rising in her throat. She knelt down, grabbing Leo by the shoulders. "We have to be very quiet. We are going to hide in the panic room behind Gabriel's office." She led them through the adjoining servant corridors, avoiding the main halls. When they reached the heavy oak doors of Gabriel's study, a flash of lightning illuminated a figure standing by the desk. Evelyn froze, pushing Leo and Maria behind her. "I wouldn't go in there, Evelyn," a smooth, familiar voice echoed in the darkness. A flashlight clicked on, blinding her temporarily. As her eyes adjusted, she saw Dominic Vitti standing there, a silver revolver pointed directly at her chest. "Dominic?" Evelyn breathed, her mind struggling to process the betrayal. "What are you doing?" "Securing my retirement," Dominic said casually, stepping closer. "Gabriel has gone soft, bringing a nurse and a brat into our world, sparing the Kroll analysts instead of burying them. He's losing his edge. I made a deal with Roman Cavalli. I deliver the woman and the boy, and I get the Southside territories all to myself." Evelyn backed up slowly, her mind racing. "You were the one," she whispered, the puzzle pieces slamming together. "The sit-down at the warehouse a month ago. Gabriel said his own lieutenant sold him out. It wasn't just a random ambush. It was you." Dominic offered a cold, mocking smile. "I wounded the king, but you, playing the Good Samaritan, patched him up. You ruined my coup, Evelyn. Now, you're going to fix it. Move." He gestured with the gun toward the grand staircase. Evelyn looked at the barrel of the weapon, then down at Leo, who was trembling against her leg. A primal, fierce maternal rage ignited within her, burning away the last remnants of the timid nurse she used to be. She was the woman who had saved Gabriel Navarro. She belonged to the shadows now. "Maria," Evelyn said softly, "take Leo. Run to the panic room." "Don't be stupid," Dominic sneered, taking a step forward. "I'll shoot you where you stand." "No, you won't," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "Cavalli wants us alive to torture Gabriel. If you kill us, your deal is void." Dominic hesitated for a fraction of a second, a fatal miscalculation. Evelyn didn't run. She lunged forward, not away from the gun, but directly toward him. She swept her arm upward, knocking his wrist off its trajectory just as he pulled the trigger. The deafening crack of the revolver shattered the silence of the estate, the bullet burying itself harmlessly in the mahogany ceiling. Before Dominic could recover, Evelyn drove her knee upward with devastating force, connecting squarely with his groin. Dominic gasped, doubling over in agony. Evelyn didn't stop. She grabbed the heavy brass paperweight from Gabriel's desk and brought it down violently against the back of Dominic's skull. The traitor crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Evelyn stood over him, panting heavily, her hands shaking as she picked up his discarded revolver. The nurse had officially shed her white coat. Trapped in the underground bunker when the power grid failed, Gabriel realized instantly. The severed communications line was a calculated distraction. Drawing his Sig Sauer, he forced open the electronic locks and burst into the subterranean hallway, meeting Silas and 6 armed loyalists. "Breach in the East Wing," Silas barked. "Internal sabotage." "It's Vidi." "Kill them all," Gabriel roared. "Nobody touches my family." He moved through the dark corridors like a phantom, dropping 2 of Cavalli's gunmen in the billiard room before they could even raise their weapons. The estate had become a war zone. His only driving force was Evelyn and the boy. If he lost them, the monster inside him would consume the world entirely. Reaching the West Wing, Gabriel kicked open the study doors. Weapon raised, he stopped dead. In the glow of a battery-operated lantern, Dominic Vitti lay bleeding and unconscious on the Persian rug. Standing over him, gripping a silver revolver with white knuckles, was Evelyn. Leo and Maria were tucked safely behind the desk. Evelyn's wild green eyes locked onto Gabriel. Lowering his weapon, Gabriel stepped over the traitor and pulled Evelyn into a desperate, crushing embrace. The revolver clattered to the floor as she buried her face in his shoulder. "I've got you," Gabriel breathed. "He let them in," she sobbed. Gabriel's eyes hardened into obsidian as Silas and the security team entered. "Estate is secure, boss. Vitti's loyalists are in custody." "Take Dominic to the warehouse," Gabriel ordered coldly. "Keep him awake." He turned and gently cupped Evelyn's face. "I have to finish this tonight, Tesoro." "Do it," Evelyn whispered, a fierce understanding passing between them. "End it." Before dawn broke, the Chicago underworld was violently reorganized. Gabriel didn't send hitmen. He went himself, breaching Roman Cavalli's Gold Coast penthouse. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Kicking open the doors to Cavalli's private office, Gabriel found the rival boss frantically loading a shotgun. Without a word, Gabriel put 2 bullets directly into Cavalli's chest, ending the war before sunrise. When Gabriel returned, the storm had broken, bathing the fortified estate in golden light. He found Evelyn in the sunroom, watching Leo play on the lawn with a tactical German shepherd. Covered in the blood of his enemies, Gabriel felt something entirely foreign: peace. Sitting beside her, she didn't recoil from the violence clinging to him. She simply leaned against his shoulder, her hand finding his. "Is it over?" she asked softly. "It's over," Gabriel confirmed. "Cavalli is gone. We are untouchable." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside sat a platinum ring with a rare green diamond matching her eyes. "I cannot promise you a normal life, Evelyn," Gabriel said, emotion thickening his voice. "But I promise this empire is yours. I will shield you from the dark until my last breath. Marry me." Evelyn looked at the ring, then at her son, perfectly safe in the morning light. She turned back to the dangerous man who worshipped her. "You already owe me a life debt, Mr. Navarro," Evelyn smiled, her radiant expression chasing away the final shadows. "I suppose marrying you is the only way to ensure you pay it off," she offered her hand. As Gabriel slid the ring onto her finger, the devil finally found redemption in the arms of the woman who refused to let him cry in the dark. The violent storm that washed Gabriel into Evelyn's life ultimately cleansed the darkness from his empire. Love, born in a desperate, blood-soaked alley, forged an unbreakable bond between a ruthless king and a fiercely protective mother. Evelyn transformed from a terrified bystander into the resilient queen of the Navarro Syndicate, proving that true strength isn't just wielding power, but knowing how to endure it. Gabriel learned that his greatest weapon wasn't his wealth or his enforcers, but the family he chose to protect at all costs. Together, they built a fortress of loyalty that no rival could ever breach, securing a gilded, protected future for little Leo. The monster of the Chicago underworld had been tamed, not by force, but by the healing touch of a woman who saw the man beneath the scars.